So I'm really excited to introduce this next panel. Every year we have one or two executive panels from one company to really talk about what they're doing together to create change around diversity and inclusion. It's something that I believe is really important because it's when we work together across our organizations that we fundamentally shift those organizations. And so this panel coming up on stage now is 3 executives from Bank of America talking about what they're working on together to create change, specifically looking at their leadership journey and focusing on equity, advocacy, and allyship. So please join me in welcoming to the stage Cameron, Mohamed, and Rachel. Yeah. Awesome. Welcome.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah. So, well, let's start first. Quick introductions. Say who you are and what your role is, and maybe just one quick sentence about why this work matters to you at a personal level.
Okay. Do we want to go this way, or do we
go for it, Mohamed?
Go ahead and start.
Go for it.
Mohamed Gahnoog, Bank of America. I work in our Global Technology and Operations division, primarily against our product division. Why this work is important to me, to put it simply in a single sentence, is the weight of responsibility. Because I recognized many years ago that if not for the courage, the sacrifices, and the choices that others have made in the past, I would not be sitting here having this conversation with this audience. And so to me, now that it is my turn, and I have been given an opportunity to help further drive the mission and create an environment that others that are both in my time and in the future, able to greatly bring themselves, their whole selves, and have the same opportunities and hopefully better opportunities than I did. That is what drives me.
Awesome. Awesome.
Rachel?
Rachel.
Hi, everyone. Rachel Kim Bierner. I'm also in Global Technology and Operations at Bank of America in the Global Information Security Organization. I serve as the Business Information Security Officer for cloud computing, so help facilitate business engagements with cloud solutions as needed from a security perspective. And kind of the personal drive for me is very similar to what Mohamed said around, I did throughout my career, I've really benefited from sponsorship and allyship and advocacy from those around me, from self-advocacy as well. And I see the next generation of talent. My daughter, and my son, their generation as well, and just really seeing how we can continue to pave the road and get to a point where, this is business as usual and not a special topic.
Awesome.
That's very good. I'm Cameron Wadley. No surprise, I'm also Global Technology and Operations with Bank of America. My day job, I'm a Chief Operating Officer for client-facing platforms. Basically, all of the technology that our customers and clients see is technology that I manage in my day job. Why I do this, candidly, for a large part of my career, probably like a lot of other people, every so often I feel like a bit of an anomaly, a unicorn. I don't always get the sense that I fit. And one of the things that really inspires me, particularly when I talk to people who are younger, earlier in their careers, they've just got this drive and this passion, and they can sort of foresee an environment that's a little different than the one that I came up in. And then also hearing from more senior leaders in the company, starting with the CEO, that this is really something that he wants to be part of our corporate culture, inspires me to say, you know what, let me pay this one forward. Because I'd like to be a part of a positive change on this one, because I have an idea, a very clear idea of what the future could hold if we do this right.
Awesome. Awesome. So Bank of America is a large company, 200,000 employees across several countries. It's very dispersed. How do you do this work across a big population and also across a very dispersed population? One of the things that I thought was really powerful when we were talking earlier is that you take a systemic approach to this and you're really looking at it in a systemic way. But how do you do that?
So I'm going to start with one component, and then I'll turn it over to Rachel and Cameron for others. But one piece of the puzzle is the organic piece around the engagement of our employees and the ability to go ahead and create diversity groups within our own organization that actually allow employees to be a part of the broader mission for the firm. The goal, again, is to be able to get to a state, using Rachel's words, where things are BAU. The work itself does not happen because individuals are pushing for change. It happens because it's part of the DNA of a company, right? And when that becomes a part of the culture of the firm, then eventually it just becomes more natural. So that's one component, the establishment of our diversity groups. You guys want to cover a couple more?
Yeah, so diversity and inclusion, it's a business imperative for us from the very top. So Mohamed talked about our employee networks, which we have. They're global networks, so they represent the global employee base. And it's supported and led from our CEO and chair all the way down. Oftentimes, these groups are led by senior leaders or sponsored by senior leaders who may not be part of the community that that employee network represents. And so it really kind of comes down from the top as well as from the bottom up. So we have this convergence, which I think really gives it power, as opposed to just being a top-down declarative or a bottom-up grassroots effort. We can really bring it together, and that's really been the power of it for us.
So not a whole lot that I can add to that, but I'll say the proof is in the pudding. It's one thing for our senior-most leaders to say, "Thou shalt be diverse and inclusive." It's another thing for the other, 199,000 plus employees to completely buy in. One of the things that we've done to make sure that this is really part of our fabric, part of our culture, is to make it fun. We've got, quarterly global diversity and inclusion awards where employees can sort of nominate their peers who have been, sort of exemplars for target state values, for really taking action, for being inclusive and driving that change. And that's something that's celebrated all the way up to the CEO. So for people who don't necessarily fully appreciate the business value associated with having that very inclusive and diverse workforce, if for no other reason, it just feels good and it's fun and motivating, and eventually it will be sort of an afterthought. And that's just how we roll as an organization.
Awesome. And can you talk a little bit about how you're working together as leaders on this work? What does that look like? Tell me a little bit about that. Tell us a little bit about that.
So there are multiple layers to this. So one layer are the individual networks and the individual relationships between multiple leaders. And of course, taking back a lot of the things that we learn and the relationships we form in conferences and safe places like this. Just to give you an example, I asked Rachel, we've actually never met in person, and she was more than willing to take time out of her schedule to come here and do this. So that's one part of that organic piece. Another part of this, I think, is also where the communities themselves are not only sharing experiences, because one of the things that we all have to recognize is that despite being part of diverse communities, there are experiences that we will actually never understand as deeply because we don't have as much visibility into them. And so there's a great deal of power and a great deal of wealth and a great deal of satisfaction that one can gain from having a place of understanding for the experience that someone else it's a part of their ecosystem. So the old saying goes, walk a mile in another person's shoes, and you'd be surprised by what you learn. So our diversity groups and our communities are actually sharing knowledge between each other. And we're sharing tactics and ideas and thoughts between each other. And in turn, that is allowing each of us to be that much more effective as we're basically trying to continue to collectively drive the mission forward and starting to define allyship in a new light. And that to me is one of the things we do that I look at with pride.
Awesome. Yeah, and I mentioned earlier that this is really, it's a business imperative. There's business value with diversity and inclusion, with ensuring that our organization culturally, the representation of its talent represents or reflects the communities that we serve, the customers and clients that we serve. It's so ingrained that it's really just part of the job description for the leaders, really for everyone. I can't imagine there's anyone who works for Bank of America that has not heard about diversity and inclusion as a core value for us, and has participated or at least seen activities and events that are happening, because they're always happening. They're happening throughout, and they're fun, and it really brings a cross-section of people together. And so there's really a lot of encouragement from events and activities that are happening, from what we hear from our leadership, from each other, how we all are engaged. And so it's part of the day-to-day. And I think as leaders, we really promote that, we model that, and we just, make it part of the job description, if you will.
I think there's also an aspect that, despite the fact that we're talking about our journey as a company, 200,000 people in 8 lines of business and all of these different countries represented, we do have pockets. And one of the things that I think we do remarkably well is collaborate among what would otherwise be disparate parts of the organization. So for example, we've got a particularly muscular organization supporting representation of women within technology and operations. They are very far down the path. They're making fantastic progress. They're sort of the shining beacon of how things could be across the board. But when we think about some of those other underrepresented groups, the last thing that we would ever want to have happen is competition among people who are already underrepresented. So we have active partnering, sharing of best practices, introducing to other organizations who might be able to help along. We've had co-sponsored events between disparate segments of our employee population, and all of these things just make it less about a particular group of people and more about that broader mission that if we do this right, sort of the rising tide lifts all ships. Right. And we really do take that to heart.
And really the theme, just to add to that, allyship is just a theme that's...
What I was going to ask.
I knew that. But, I think because of the network of employee networks that we have, both local and global, right? So we have local chapters, we have global leadership, and through that, really the promotion of allyship. And so, again, just another theme that we hear from top down is allyship within the bank. We all know what it means. We've known what it meant for years, and just how we do come together to promote the overall cause, as opposed to just working within a particular silo or a particular community or a particular cross-section. Because none of us are one thing. So I'm Asian, I'm female, I'm a technology, on and on and on. So how do we represent that in the collaboration and cooperation across?
Yeah, and it seems like it's a combination of allyship with each other. You're all leaders, and helping support each other, I think, is really important, and being allies for each other, and then working within the culture to make sure that is rippling throughout the culture.
Right.
Yeah. I think another piece of the puzzle that is important is the recognition of the fact that change is not easy, and that it will not happen if you simply look within your own scope. One needs to find allies. The definition of a minority or an underrepresented group is that there are not that many of you in this given locale, in this given zone. And if you cannot help each other, as opposed to competing with each other, none of you will succeed. And it's important for you to recognize that principle, because then that creates the set of follow-on actions and the set of things that we all must do in order to work collectively as a group and work with allies that are not even within your own communities. Because a lot of times, back to the theme of understanding experiences that others may have within their lives and within their journeys that I may not have exposure to, that education is important. That outreach is important. That connection with other human beings is important. And those become valuable tools and valuable means for you to be able to pursue the broader mission for the benefit of all.
Yeah, and one of the things we talked about earlier is also that, there's 2 components of this. One component is allyship, and the other component is self-advocacy, and that we really need to work to make sure people are advocating for themselves as well. Do you want to talk a little bit about that too?
We can. I think that the key thing to consider is that advocacy for oneself starts with recognition. So it's important to try and be aware, if you want to call it that, of what equity looks like across the board. From there, it is less about challenging individuals, more or less I think the term that is one of our rules of engagement that Wayne was using earlier. Shaming individuals or trying to shame individuals into doing the right thing is not an operative strategy. It's not how you should operate. Nobody would want to be shamed into doing anything. But trying to recognize this is what a level playing field looks like. How can we try and educate others on how to get to that level playing field, and how I can use myself as an example to do so? I think to me that's important, right? Because again, others will have to be educated on experiences they have no visibility into. and that's a part of the journey. Not sure if there's more you guys want to say on that, but.
Yeah, I think there's also the notion that we as leaders in the company need to create the safety, right, so that people do feel comfortable to self-advocate, to bring up whatever it is that they feel the need to address, whether it's the small kind of comment that was made in a meeting or one-on-one, or something more substantive like compensation or whatever it might be. And so I think it's a matter of creating the environment where we acknowledge that there are things that need to be said, things that need to be addressed, context that needs to be set, so that we can make the right decisions. We can understand what what our employees and our communities are faced with, and take the right action towards the path to equity. That context is really important.
I think there are certain things that we do as an organization that are probably not unique. We've got training courses on unconscious bias that are available to everyone, and we've got groups of the organization who may send everyone in their org to go through that and have dialogue about it. One of the things that's been, I think, a real highlight over the past few years is the notion of what we call courageous conversations, where we will pull together a cross-section of everyone and talk about one of those topics that's generally taboo, the things that people don't always feel comfortable talking about. And we do it, and it's real, it's authentic. We have leaders who are prepared to tell their full stories, even if it makes people a little bit uncomfortable. And we have some of the Q&A, some of that dialogue in an environment where everyone knows that it's safe, it's candid. And as powerful as those conversations are, what's even more so are the smaller discussions that happen without cameras, without a big organized production, where people just say, you know what? I was a part of this conversation, and it just really opened up my eyes, and I just want to tell someone about it. And that's how you start to make people more aware, and that's how you drive some of that positive change. It becomes self-fulfilling prophecy. But it starts with people feeling comfortable and having a platform to even engage in the discussion. You can't fix a problem that you're unaware of.
Right.
Right. You all talk about this as a journey. That's the title of the session too. Where are you in the journey? What is next for the journey? What does that journey look like?
Wow. I think that despite all of the progress that we've made, it is important to recognize that we have a long way to go. If the end target state, if that BAU equitable state had already been reached, none of us would be sitting here having this conversation.
Right.
So we have done many things and created structures that are moving us further down the path. I think that the momentum is pointing in the right direction. That being said, now it is upon us to not only increase that momentum, but think about ways and approaches that we can take that to the next level. As I was waiting for this conversation to begin, I remember the previous speaker standing on stage talking about how low the representation of female technologists really is. And that 9% number really stood out to me. I mean, to me, you look at that, and the first reaction you get is, wow, really? That's the best we can do? And then you recognize that, you know what, it took a while, it took work, it took dedication, it took patience to get us to that point. But you're just getting started. Right? And so
Hopefully, yes.
that's kind of how we see it, both as individuals but also as an organization, because I think that despite everything that we have mentioned as a firm and the things that we do, it is also important to recognize that our leadership also understands that we still have a long way to go, and that's an important recognition towards heading in the right direction. Anything you guys want to add to that?
Absolutely. So I think it's a journey. There's a path, right? That we focus on diversity, inclusion, belonging, and as Mohamed mentioned, kind of this end state of equity, where it's business as usual and mission accomplished, whatever. And what's really great is as we make, 'cause the progress we've made has been wonderful. But I think it allows us to then start to peel back the layers. So, as a company, we may have great gender balance, as an example. But then you start to peel back. Well, how does it look in a technology organization? How does it look with engineers? How does it, you can kind of start to find, like, where are those pockets or those specific areas where we don't have parity or we don't have the equilibrium that we're looking for, and start to be able to take action. So again, just getting to where we have context, we have information, we can be deliberate in addressing, kind of on our journey towards equity, I think is really exciting to see that we can kind of get past those first steps and start to peel things back.
Awesome, awesome.
I think when I think about the journey, and I think about where we are and where we're headed, I can't tell you exactly where on that journey we are. I know we're not at the finish line, but I know a lot of what we've been focusing on as an organization is setting the foundation. And so, when I take a look at some of our mission statements that our CEO and other, super senior leaders espouse across the whole organization, they say, if 1 out of every 2 human beings is a woman, why should that not be the case internally to this organization across the board? Right. And until we're reaching that point, even if we've made really good steps towards that, we're not done yet. And the other aspect is it can't just be a numbers game. It's got to be a cultural one. It's got to be one that sustains itself. I think earlier in our journey, and again, I know this is a little bit ambiguous, but earlier in our journey, before we were having the candid discussions about underrepresentation and the possibilities, underrepresented people were left to fend for themselves. Women had to be the ones to raise their hands and say, there aren't a whole lot of us around. Hispanic and Black and African American and Native American employees would have to say, I don't necessarily feel supported, I don't necessarily feel that network. And that can be incredibly uncomfortable. To get to a point now where you have allies who don't necessarily belong to that underrepresented group raising their hand saying, Houston, we've got a problem,
right,
and let's come forward with some solutions, I think is a really powerful step along those lines. We're not quite at the point where we completely match the communities that we serve, but we are making very strong strides. We've got leadership commitment. We are tracking our activities and our progress, and we're also keeping a pulse of our organization, not only the numbers, but also how people feel about it, and making sure that we're true to ourselves, being inclusive. So if by chance you're not a member of an underrepresented group, do you feel alienated? Or do you instead feel a certain sense of obligation that you may also be able to participate?
Part of it.
Yeah.
And partner, that's right.
Yeah.
Great. We are out of time. I just want to ask really quickly, Mohamed, I'm just going to give you the last word.
Okay.
Which is that you come to a conference like this, you spend time and you invest in it. Mm-hmm. What do you do now? What do you do with this?
So I think that the first thing that one should have coming to a place like this is the recognition that humility is a useful trait. This is not only an opportunity to have discussions, but it's also an opportunity to learn. And as you learn, you pick up practices, you decide what you're going to do next, and you take that back with you. So one thing that struck out for me yesterday, as I was sitting in the career fair, there was a gentleman that approached me, and he is part of an organization that is advocating on behalf of stature-challenged individuals. There was another individual that also approached me that is advocating on behalf of individuals with disabilities yesterday during the dinner, and we had a chance to connect. Right then and there is an opportunity for me to do more than what I was doing when I came here, right? And I have to be humble enough to recognize that, to be aware of it, and to take advantage of it. I think that in times like this, I'm also reminded of the words of Dr. Martin Luther King. The arc of history is long, but it bends towards justice. This is work that requires courage. It is work that requires patience. It is work that requires the ability to be able to reach out to others and to be able to connect with others, because this is how you educate, it's how you teach, it's how you build communities, it is how you're able to move the dial forward. Because at a very basic level, all of us are human beings who share common values. The more we recognize that the work that is being done in communities like this is for the greater good and actually aligns to all of the values that we share, the more successful we all become as we are trying to create a more equitable environment. And to me, that's an important takeaway.
Awesome. Thank you three.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.